Good evening and welcome to Storytime with Angelina. Tonight's story is The Glassmaker's Daughter, written by Dianne Hoffmeyer, illustrated by Jane Ray. Published by Quarto Knows. Did you know in Venice, recipes for making glass were kept closely guarded? A guild for glassmakers, the Ars Fuleria, was started in 1224, a long time ago. Glassmakers became so important that they were able to carry swords, and their daughters married into Venice's wealthiest families. But there was a catch. Glassmakers were not allowed to leave the city in case their secret recipes were passed on to other cities and countries. Looking glass was made by covering a flat sheet of glass with a thin layer of silver, mercury, and tin, sometimes even gold. This made the reflection more beautiful. There was a separate guild for looking glass makers that made sure the recipe for making mirrors remained a secret. So here's a story inspired by that. There was once a beautiful city built on water. Its palaces floated like birds in nests on the sea, and its lamplight danced like fireflies across the ripples. Daniela, the glassmaker's daughter, lived in this shimmering city surrounded by delicate glass made in her father's furnace. Yet despite all this beauty, Daniela was a melancholy girl. She lay next to the canal all day long, scowling into the water, gloomy, glum, and bored. In despair, her father announced, "I'll give a glass palace to the person who can make my daughter smile." So his glassblowers set to work. They blew and pulled and pinched the molten glass into silver-spun walls with pineapple-topped turrets and winged dragon doors. News soon spread of the silver-spun palace, and people came from far and wide to compete for Daniela's smile. Pineapples and dragons, what a combination. First to arrive was Maestro Barbagalata. Can you say that, kids? Barbagalata. "Regard this," he said, as he blew fiery rings of flame into the air. He swallowed swords and even snakes, and almost turned himself inside out with his tricks on a tightrope. But instead of exciting Daniela, she was gloomier than ever. Then the most famous of mask makers, Donna Violetta Rufina Zangara, arrived with a cabinet of masks. Moons and stars and suns, one a nest of twigs with tiny jewel-encrusted birds' eggs. Another, a mermaid's lair lined with shells and pearls. "Try these, they'll bring a smile to your face," said Donna Violetta Rufina Zangara, holding up the smiliest of all her masks. But instead of delighting Daniela, she was glummer than ever. Then Leonardo Leonino Grandi arrived. "Behold this!" he cried. He swept aside the curtain of his gondola. A huge lion jumped up with such a roar that the gondola rocked. Leonardo Leonini Grandi swayed, then fell backwards into the canal with an almighty splash, the lion on top of him. But even this didn't bring a smile to Daniela's lips. Glove makers, tart bakers, trumpet players, dragon slayers, Monkey trickers, pocket pickers, bell ringers, opera singers, even sausage stringers all failed to make Daniela smile.
"What's to be done?" her father groaned. "How will such a miserable girl ever find happiness?"
But one young glassmaker longed more than anyone to make Daniela smile. In a corner of the workshop, Angelo drew a molten globe from the furnace and blew a bubble of glass. "Flux and fire," he whispered. Then he snipped the bubble and laid it flat, and smoothed on slivers of silver mercury. "Mercury and tin," he chanted. Then he rubbed the slivers down with a hare's paw. Foiled and finished and polished and thin, then he sang his secret song again. "Flux and fire, mercury and tin, foiled and finished and polished thin." The other glassmakers peered across at him. "What are you making, Angelo?" "A gift that will make Daniela smile."
"She hasn't smiled for an alchemist, an acrobat, an opera singer, or a sausage stringer. Why should she smile for you?"
Angelo ignored them all and went looking for Daniela. He held out his gift. "Glass? I don't need glass." She pushed it aside. "Look again, Principessa. This is no ordinary piece of glass. It's different. Look into it." Daniela scowled as she held it up to her face. "What do you see?" Angelo asked. "I see a creature with a mouth like an upside-down slice of lemon and the eyes of a cross dragon." "Look again." She peered back at the glass. "It's the funniest face in the world." Then the face started to change. The frown lines disappeared. The eyes sparkled. The mouth turned up. Daniela burst out laughing. And the more she looked at the person in the glass, the more she laughed. At each fresh peal of laughter, glass began to shiver and tinkle around her. The palace quivered. A pineapple snapped off a turret and came tumbling down. The silver-spun walls splintered. There was a sound of cracking, shattering, splintering. Then the entire palace fell to smithereens. Ooh. That's a little bit dangerous. Don't touch broken glass, it's sharp. Daniela's father rushed forward. "Angelo, I'll build you another palace, but tell me your secret. How did your magic glass change my daughter?" Angelo shook his head. "She changed herself. My glass only reflects what's already there. Happiness is inside all of us. You only have to discover it." Daniela couldn't stop herself from peeping into the glass and laughing again. "You're right. I found it by looking at my gloomy, grumpy face. I don't need mask makers, tart bakers, trumpet players, dragon slayers, bell ringers, or even sausage stringers to make me happy." And she laughed with such delight that the glass pieces at her feet started tinkling. Then every bell in the city began to wobble with her laughter. The sound pealed out until even the palaces seemed to rock on their floating nests. And all through the city, people began to laugh and romp. Petticoats swirled, corsets popped, old men stomped. Until even the Grand Doge came out of his palace to see what the fuss was about. When he heard Daniela's laughter, he kicked up his heels and danced. So now, when you hear the bells of Venice ringing out over the water, you can be sure Daniela is laughing And don't be surprised if you peep into a looking glass to find a small smile creeping across your face. That's the end of today's story. I hope you enjoyed. Bonne nuit.